Okay. All right. I'm going to do another exciting, dramatic story. And I picked these stories because literally the story that I just told, I had not ever told in public. I think maybe I might have done part of it in Bynum one night. But anyway, the Bynum workshop, we have a workshop once a month on second Mondays of the month. And the Bynum workshop Monday night, I said, I've got a new story and I think it'll work. And they humored me and let me tell that story. And I'm like, okay, we can make that. That's a story. I can perform that. So thank you to the members of the Bynum workshop. Raise your hand so we can. Yeah, we've got old and young members, and they are what feeds the Bynum storytelling show. And so, if you've ever thought, if you come across a point where you think, that might be a story I could hang my hat on. A moment, where somebody looks at you. One time my sister, she used to get a phone call. This fella had the wrong number, and his name was Long Staggering Dog. And different times of the year, he would call and leave a message on her answering machine to the effect, and he would tell her the wrong number. He didn't even know, but he would leave this message saying, "Hey, bro, how you doing? This is Long Staggering Dog." And he'd say, I've been here and I've done this and I've been through that and I've been through this. Big old long story of what all he had and whatever had happened to him in his life. He was a homeless person moving around the country. I don't actually want to call him homeless. He was a hobo, an adventurer moving around the country. And he's been eating, he'd say, and we caught some catfish and we cooked it up right there on the river and it was mighty crispy and it was really good. And when he gets through this big old long story from this person my sister didn't even know, he'd say, all right, well, that's all the news from Long Staggering Dog. I just wanted to call and wish you Merry Christmas. Or he'd say, I just wanted to call and wish you Happy Mother's Day. I just wanted to call and wish you Happy Birthday. And Merry Christmas and things like that. And so it got to be, that was sort of like our buzzword in the family, and things like that. And when something was extremely good, we were eating Sunday lunch at Mama's, we'd look around and go, that's mighty tasty and really crispy. Even if we were eating Gouda mac and cheese, we'd go, that's really tasty. And somebody else would say, and kind of crispy. And we'd turn to my sister Tammy and say, have you heard any news from Long Staggering Dog lately? She says, yeah, he's been down in Mississippi. He got caught under a bridge one night when it was flooding. She'd give us a whole Long Staggering Dog report. And then he said, happy birthday, happy Mother's Day, and things like that. So that was we miss Long Staggering Dog. I don't know what happened to him. I've looked him up on Google, and I can't find him, by the way. But those are just words that you can hang your hat on. You're going to miss a show. It's going to be a show. This story is full of things you can hang your hat on. In 2001, it was, I think, March 23rd, 24th, somewhere along in there. It was a Saturday night. It was Ken Harvey's birthday, and I was supposed to go to his birthday party. And instead, I had been dating a fella in Atlanta, and I was sending him email. And I did some little laundry, big old exciting Saturday night in Bynum, and I sat down about 9:30 to do some email. And sometime about 11:30 or something, I said, I've got to get off the computer. I need to go over to Ken's. I could hear there were fireworks going on at Ken's birthday party. He's just the next street over. And I'm like, they're having fireworks and a birthday party and everything, and I'm missing it. And I was like, I got it. And so I shut the computer down, and I went to the kitchen and my computer's right beside the kitchen door, so I just got up and went straight into the kitchen. My back was away from the street, from the face front of the house. And I get some orange juice, and I remember the sweet acid taste of the orange juice. It was very refreshing. And about that time, there is a loud wham, wham, wham on my front door. Just whack, like with every bit of somebody's force, they were beating the daylights out of my front door. And before I even turned around, before I even set down my glass of orange juice on the kitchen counter, I knew that the Bynum cotton mill was on fire. My house adjoins what was the cotton mill property. And my house is 800 square feet. It's got a tin roof, and the rest of it is made from heart pine. I live in a village with about 45 or 50 houses, all of them built about 1890 to about 1910, all made of heart pine. They're all like 10 and 15 feet apart. It was a village full of kindling. And the Bynum Mill covered like the space of about 4 football fields, and it was 3 to 5 stories high. And the outside was brick, but the inside was wood, and they had oiled the floors every week inside the mill to keep the dust down. And it was on fire. It had been empty since I had moved into Bynum in 1983. It had closed in December of 1983 and never reopened. And the exodus of textile jobs in North Carolina, it happened in Bynum. And I set my orange juice glass down and I turn around and look, and sure enough, I could see the living room door from where I stood, the front door, and the heavy curtains on it, and it looked like there was a movie Klieg light outside on my front porch. There was this orange glow coming out from the curtains on either side that lit up the entire living room. And I knew not only was the mill on fire, it was in full blaze. This is all before I ever moved one step. I get a very sick feeling in my stomach right here. Just absolutely knots. I think, Eloise, you were one of the people I called that night, and I called Louise Kessel that had lived next door to me. And she lived about 10 miles outside in the country, and her husband Holmes came. She told Eloise later, quote unquote, because Cindy just sounded so scared. She said, I knew there wasn't anything we could do about my house, but Cindy was just so scared. It's one of the few times in my life that I have been terrified and I've not been able to pull it back and become a semi-functioning, reasonable human being. Even when my father passed away, I held it together. I was the person making all the phone calls at 1 o'clock in the morning when my dad died. I was the person holding it together while everybody else was crying, bless their hearts. It hits me. I run a hotel for 10 years. I worked at the Health Sciences Library, worked the circulation reference desk a lot of times till midnight. We had all kinds of situations, basements flooding, sprinklers going off, fire alarms, homeless people. Oh, sometimes people looking at pornography or drunk people sleeping in a study room, whatever. I was the person that could handle stuff like that. That moment when I walked out on my front porch and I saw those, I couldn't even see the top of the flames beyond the porch roof. It was beyond, it was like I could feel the heat on my face like 200 yards away. I was absolutely terrified. I went back in the house, and you walk back in. You know, you're just having an average everyday Saturday night. You've been reading email and doing a little laundry, and drinking you some orange. And you look around at your little hovel that I love dearly. And I say, okay, what can I save? Because we fully expected if my house caught, the house next to me was going to catch, and the next house was going to catch, and the fireball was just going to move. It was like those poor people in California. I know, I feel them. I feel them because I've been there. They say ice water is in your veins. No, no. It's pure blood and it's icy. It's that cold. And so I decided, okay, first thing I've got to do is try it. Luckily, a couple days before, it had rained pretty heavy. It was March. It was misty. It was kind of cold and damp. A couple days before, we'd had a good soaking rain. I'm like, okay, there's some things you have in your repertoire here that's going to help you. And I said, okay, I've got to get the water hose out from underneath the basement, and I've got to get it hooked up. And I had one of those diverter things where I could have one water hose going to the backyard and one going to the front yard. I'm like, I need somebody to help me water the yard and hose down the deck and hose down anything around, like the landscape timbers out and on the retaining wall. Anything that might catch fire, we need to soak. And so I get the water hose, and I'm trying to wrestle with the water hose and I get up there, and I cannot get my hands to work. My hands were shaking so hard that I couldn't get the hose bib screwed onto the faucet. They're shaking so hard. My outside water spigot is on the upper corner of my house. It's on the opposite the mill. It's like the mill's down here. There's a little, like, one-lane street, and then my house is up here. My water spigot is on the back corner, caddy corner from there. I could look up against the house on the back side of it, on the back caddy corner of it. I could look up and see flames 40 and 50 feet up in the air. In other words, the flames were so high that they were in the sky above my house from the backside. And I keep trying to get myself together. And in the meantime, I have my wireless phone, not the Kyocera, the wireless phone in my hand, and I'm speed dialing my neighbors and trying to find somebody home that can help me get the water hose and get to the front yard and water while I water the back. I finally get my neighbor Jim's answering machine, and he's one of those people who always goes to bed early. And I said, you know what? I know their answering machine's in their bedroom. If I holler loud enough, Jim Smoot's going to hear it. He's already in bed. I'm going to wake him up. And I hollered into the phone, Jim, this is Cindy. The mill's on fire. I need you to come and help me water the yard. And before I even could get the last word out, I could hear the phone being picked up, and he's like, okay, Cindy, got you, be right there. I was like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I've got somebody coming. Somebody that maybe has a brain left in their head and that could help. I can't get, and I keep saying this to myself, I can't get the water hose on. I can't get the water hose. I can't get, and about that time I hear this little voice up near the street that said, Cindy, is that you? And it was Carol Payne. And she had been at work in a second job in Pittsboro, and she had closed the store she was working at and came home and had come across the bridge, the new bridge on 15501, the one that crosses up at the dam, and had seen the flames and the smoke and knew something in Bynum was on fire, but didn't know what or whose. That was a terrifying 5 minutes it took her to get around the river and back to. And so the people that had banged on my door, I could hear them going up the street. They were whamming on the people from the party, the birthday party where they had a bonfire. They hadn't had fireworks. It was barrels of stuff in the mill that was exploding. It was old gas tanks exploding. It was all kinds of stuff that had been like tanks of like plastic materials. It was all exploding. Polyester bales were blowing up, and not only was there was fire going into the sky, but there was pieces of ash and char falling, literally falling like rain, and I could see holes being burned in my like umbrella, the deck furniture, and it was Carol comes running, gets home from the store and comes running down the hill. And she couldn't see anybody. She didn't know where everybody was. All she saw was this big, huge flames. The fire trucks weren't even there yet. Fire station is a volunteer fire station. It's 3 miles away up at Farrington. And it took them about 15 or 20 minutes to get there. That was the longest 15 or 20 minutes of my life. And she gets down the hill, and everybody was in their houses getting their photo albums, getting their kids out of bed, getting the dog in the car and driving it up the hill like to the ball field where it would be safe. Because we all knew if one house caught, they were all going to go. And Carol comes over, and I said, Carol, you have to put the hose on. My hands are shaking so bad that I can't. I can't. And about then is when I called Louise, who still owned, even though she lived 10 miles out in the country, she still owned the house next door. And I called Eloise, and I said, and I left a voicemail and said, the mill's on fire, the mill's on fire. So we get the hose hooked up. Carol's in the front yard, water in the front yard. I'm in the backyard, water in the backyard, water in the deck furniture, water in the deck, water in the door frames. And then I go back in, and I'm like, okay, we got to have cats. We've got to have the dog. And I got to have the photo albums, and I got to have Aunt Merle and Aunt Jessie's and my grandmother's quilts. So I get a Rubbermaid bin, and I start stuffing quilts into it. I get another Rubbermaid bin. I start pulling photo albums off the bookcase. And people up the hill on the neighborhood are showing up, and as they show up to the front door, they don't even get up on the steps of the porch. I shove a bin at them saying, put that in my truck, put that in my truck, put that in my truck. And then Carol comes, and I hand her the elderly antique cat named Bess, who was known to have seizures and bite people. And I said, this is Bess, be careful, she bites. And there goes Nigel. Or actually, I think it was Andrew at that point in time. There went Nigel, Andrew. And there went Bear, Miss Bear, bless her little heart, the princess. So, and Checkers. Checkers went in that truck too. And then I go to get the dog. And the dog is this antique chow. Her name was Lady. And she was a chow corgi mix. She also was known to bite people too. And, but she loved Aunt Rebecca. Aunt Rebecca is and she's here tonight. Aunt Rebecca is like the dog whisperer of Bynum. I'm the cat whisperer. Rebecca's the dog whisperer. And there was 3 people on this earth that Lady liked, the chow corgi mix. I always said she had short little legs and big red hair and big red attitude to go with it. The legs were about that long and her hair was about that wide. And she had the corgi butt. I love corgi butts. Anyway, Lady was afraid of thunder and lightning, and she was afraid of fireworks. And so being the good dog that she was, and I was afraid of those things, she was hiding behind the toilet. We had the cats in the truck. We had the picture albums and the quilts in the truck. I was trying to get Lady. I had a leash. I'd go in on one side of the toilet. She'd come out on the other. I was like, the fellows with Harley on the island. I'd go around this side of the toilet. She'd go out on that. I'd go back that way. She'd go back that way. And I come out, and I'm like, I don't want to leave her. She's terrified. The house catches on fire. She's going to burn. I don't know what to do, but I've got to get the elderly antique cats that I'd had for 15 and 18 years. I had to get them to safety. My neighbors have already pulled out. Susie put their daughter Katie in the car and drove it up the hill and put her in bed up at Mary Council's house at the top of the hill because she was afraid. She says, we had to get the car out now because I was afraid the tires were going to melt. I look at the thermometer on my furnace thermostat. It was 86 degrees in my living room. It was 40 degrees outside. It was 86 degrees in my living room on the back side of the house away on the inside wall, away from the fire. 86 degrees. Heart pine will spontaneously combust at like 120 degrees. It doesn't take very much. It'll just poof, and there she goes. So I'm standing there not knowing what to do. All I'm thinking is I'm going to have to get the kiddies, and I drive a straight drive pickup truck, so not everybody in the world can drive a straight drive pickup truck. And so what I'm going to have to do is drive the pickup truck up to the top of the hill where the kiddies and the quilts and the photo albums can be safe, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to stay with Lady no matter what happens. I was not leaving that dog there by herself. And just as I get my keys and I'm heading to the truck, here comes Rebecca down the hill in her pajamas. She had slid I think she had her bedroom slippers on too. She comes running down the hill going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, the mill's on fire, the mill's on fire. And I grab both sides of her face and I get about 2 inches away from her and I look her dead in the eye and I said, Rebecca, Lady is scared and she's under the toilet and I can't get her out. And I had the leash around my neck and I take it off and I had no worries. I had no worries because if nothing else, Rebecca was going to stay with Lady till I got back from delivering the cats up the hill. And most probably, I knew almost exactly what was going to happen, and it did. Rebecca walks in the bathroom with the leash and says, well, hello, Lady, how are you? Let's go for a walk. Lady presses her little corgi butt out from underneath that toilet. Rebecca hooks her up, walks straight out and straight up the hill to where I'm parked in front of Carol's house in the driveway. 3 antique cats, Checkers, Bess that bit people, and the Princess Bear. I don't remember, there was a couple other things thrown in my purse and a couple other things thrown in the front seat and the floorboard, and poor Lady has to go in there. And she was very contrite and very calm and gets in underneath the floorboard where the gas pedal is. And she's not going anywhere. She's totally happy. That's her spot. The girls have the Antique Sisters kiddies, they have the front seat. The Quilts have the back seat, which is the bed of the truck. And I come back down the hill and then grab hold of my neighbors and we literally hold on to each other and stand in the middle of the street and fire trucks start arriving. It was a 7-alarm fire. There was fire companies that came from the north side of Durham. The fire started sometime around, between 9:30 when I had started email to like 11:25 when I'd shut the computer down. The fire had started. It had gone into a 150-foot high blaze almost instantly. And that was Saturday night. It didn't actually get put out all the way until Thursday night, almost a week later, when it finally rained. I would be at work at the library. Carol would go home like at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. I usually stayed till 6. And Carol would call me and say, don't come home yet. The black smoke you can see the black smoke billowing from Cole Park. And so I'd go to Barbara Teisinger's house and hang out. We'd have pizza and visit, and 9:30 or 10 o'clock, Carol will call me back and go, okay, the wind has changed, you can come home now. That was for 5 nights. I didn't know at the time, but post-traumatic stress syndrome. It didn't last long, but it was there. Whenever I went to sleep, I would see the flames. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see the flames. Every time I would look down towards the mill, every time I'd hear a siren in chapel, I would feel that cold ice water feeling in that sick pit in my stomach. I was just as terrified as I had been that night when I'd called Eloise and Louise on the phone and screamed at Jim Smoot to come help me. Thursday night, though, there was one more thing I'll say before I'll finish up and we'll go to intermission. The one thing that saved us that night is normally the wind. We live on a hill in a little valley normally the wind blows up the hill. My bedroom faces that way. Believe you me, I know that because I don't have insulation in the walls of my house, and there's times I can lay in bed and feel the wind on top of my head. And normally the wind blows up the hill. Everybody knows this, lives in Bynum. It's cooler down at the river. It's warmer up at the top of the hill where the ball field is. But for some reason that night, the wind was blowing downhill. And Thursday night, finally, it rained and it put the fire out all the way. The only thing they saved was one small building that has there's electric generators. They said that mill put in electric generators for hydroelectric power to run the mill, and they also wired up the Bynum houses, the mill houses where the mill workers lived, and they said that the mill owner used to go around at 9 o'clock at night and bang on the door and tell people to turn out the light, that they were burning his electricity. It was hydroelectric. It was basically free. But they were burning his electricity. They needed to turn the lights out and go to bed. But the fire companies, they let the mill burn. They saved the cogeneration building. And it's still there if you go to the park next to the Haw River there in Bynum. And they saved where the turbines are. But Friday morning I was off work. And I went down. I knew that pretty soon they would put tape up and not let anybody in on the mill site and probably start dismantling the buildings that were left, the pieces of the buildings that were left. There was 5-story high brick walls standing there with just the open windows, nothing like a Roman ruin. And I knew pretty soon that they would close the site off because of safety reasons, that I needed to go right then. I got my camera and I went down the hill. It was a film camera, and that's important. I had one roll of film, 24 pictures. There were steel I-beams half as wide as this stage, like that wide, taller than my head, that were twisted like twist ties. There was timbers bigger around than me that were burned and charred like a matchstick. There were pieces of wood and bricks, walls that had fallen in, and loading docks and railings and pieces and parts just sticking up in the sky, and everything was burnt to a solid black crisp. From the mill to the river looked like a Smokey the Bear commercial. There was about 3 trees standing. They were burnt, just absolutely burnt to charcoal. On the upper side of the mill, on the mill house side, the uphill side of the mill, there was a 3-foot wide swath around the mill walls, where the mill walls had been, that was burned. And beyond that was beautiful green grass. And beautiful green grass going up the road and around all the little mill houses. Not a single house had even a little, brush fire in front of it. The weather, with a little bit of misting rain, the rain we had had a couple days before, the people going out and watering their yards like I did with that pitiful little water hose, and the fire companies had saved us, had absolutely positively saved us. I still run into firemen every once in a while say, "You live in Bynum, don't you?" I worked that fire. And they remember the Bynum fire. Friday morning, I'm there on the mill site. And like I said, everything was burnt to an absolute crisp. I took my last picture of a big monolith of a wall with 2 big giant I-beams sticking up out of it like a modern art sculpture. And I walked around the corner, and there was the field that goes down to the river, and there was mud puddles all over it, black, sooty, charred mud puddles. And there must have been 500 butterflies in the mud puddles. I had taken my last picture. They were drinking out of the mud puddles. There was orange butterflies and black butterflies and blue butterflies. Butterflies, I I had never seen butterflies, not ever seen that many butterflies. And there was species that I didn't even know. I'm an outdoors person. I'm an animal. There was butterflies I didn't even recognize. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. It's almost like it was such a vision. I hit myself to try to make sure that instead of closing my eyes and seeing flames in front of my open eyes, there was a field of black charred wood and black charred mud puddles and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of butterflies. At that moment, I knew no matter how scary the night had been, how terrified I had been, how worried I had been about my neighbors' houses, my house, my kitties, my dogs, my neighbors' children, everything that I had been worried about, it was all for naught. Because obviously there was a divine power at work here, and I needed to just back off and relax. I knew no matter what happened to the mill property, people were already talking, should it turn into a state park? They build condos there? This is wonderful, great, fantastic real estate. Somebody should really develop it. No matter what happened to the mill property, things were going to be just all right. I was fine. My friends were fine. My neighbors were fine. Our houses were fine. Our animals were fine. It was all going to be just okay, and I didn't need to worry anymore. All right.